Yo, what's going on guys, Extra Fusion here, and today I want to do a video talking about Call of Duty World War II Vanguard and the recent rumors that the game is in a really bad state of development. These rumors are coming from a couple of reliable sources, including Tom Henderson as well as the MW2 Ghost, all on Twitter, so I am inclined to believe them somewhat. But I want to explain in this video why I'm not too worried about this whole situation, and I actually think it could turn out to be just fine. So let's talk about it. I have 4 reasons here actually. The first thing is simply we've heard this before, right? We've heard this plenty of times. Every Call of Duty has had some form of development problems in some way, shape, or form. Now, he is making it sound like this is the worst it's ever been, which is very likely considering we've been in a pandemic for a while, and Sledgehammer is definitely a smaller studio than I believe Infinity Ward and Treyarch are. Plus, they've been kind of thrown on this project a lot quicker than I think they intended, obviously. Apparently, Modern Warfare 2 sequel was supposed to come out this year instead, or the Modern Warfare 2019 sequel, but they want to give that game more time because, you know, Activision treats Infinity Ward like the golden child because, you know, their game did really well, so it makes sense why they would do that, and so they'd rather Sledgehammer pushed out a COD this year. Now, we'll get into the conversation about whether or not they should, you know, take a year off and release something else this year instead. We'll talk about them a little bit, but it seems like, yes, they're probably going to want a Call of Duty come out this year for the simple reason that people buy these games anyways. Activision knows that. If no one bought Call of Duty, if it wasn't that popular, they would definitely take their time, delay the game, and release it next year or something like that. But they don't care because they know people are going to buy it anyways. That's kind of how they work. But in terms of their development, yes, it does sound like it's worse than it ever has been, but let's just also keep in mind that we have heard this before. Black Ops Cold War, we heard this. Black Ops 4, we heard this. Now, whether or not you like those 2 games, that's up to your opinion. Personally, I actually really do enjoy Black Ops 4, and I really do enjoy Cold War, but it took a while for both of those games to get to that point. Black Ops 4 had a lot of issues at launch, we all know that, and after a couple months, it started to become a much better game. Same with even World War II in 2017, even same with Modern Warfare. All these CODs, at least the most recent ones, have been taking a couple months to get to a really good state, whether that be because there's a bunch of bugs and glitches at launch, or whether that be because there's not a lot of content at launch. Either way, the game certainly improves over time, and we're almost getting to a point where the COD isn't in its best state until the next COD comes out, which is why I think people love to revisit the old CODs, because we get to experience them in a new light instead of experiencing them when they were first out, when they kind of had a lot of problems here and there, and there was a lot of, you know, lack of content as well. But as a whole, the games were still playable. I still enjoyed them. I enjoyed Cold War and Black Ops 4 at launch more than I've ever enjoyed Modern Warfare, which is obviously a much more polished game that went through less development hell than Black Ops 4 or Cold War ever did. Again, that's up to opinion. You might prefer Modern Warfare, but I think it's more than just the time development put into the product. And this kind of goes into my next point, where the ideas and the design behind the game can sometimes be more important than that polish. That polish is going to take time, but the ideas and the design won't take as much time. So unfortunately, I would like for us to get a Call of Duty where they would succeed in both of these places, where the ideas and the design would also be just as good as the actual execution and the polish behind the game in terms of performance. But we keep getting this thing here, at least in my opinion, where we get a Call of Duty that has really good ideas and a really good design like Black Ops 4, but there's a lot of performance issues. The game's graphics aren't up to par with what it could be. There's definitely not as much content as you'd probably like. Then you get Modern Warfare the next year, one of the most polished CODs to date, probably the most beautiful looking, but the design behind it is so incredibly not what I want, I guess. Of course, some people like that, but I don't. I think their ideas are not good. I don't think it makes for a fun gameplay loop at all. So it's not enjoyable for me. And then Cold War kind of does the same thing Black Ops 4 did, where there's not that much polish there necessarily. There's definitely some. I'm not saying the game runs like crap. It definitely has some decent polish there. And same with Modern Warfare. There are some performance issues with the game, but definitely not as much as what you'd see in Cold War. But Cold War's ideas and design philosophy are just better to me. So we're kind of getting this flip-flop of things here. I would prefer design and ideas over performance though, because performance is not always going to affect you, and it's probably going to get fixed at some point. You know what I mean? A game that has a lot of performance issues will get fixed eventually, but a game that has bad design at heart is not going to get better unless they completely change their design, which usually doesn't happen. Modern Warfare didn't change the time to kill, it didn't change the minimap, it didn't change the maps, it didn't change any of these problems I had with the game, so they kind of stuck around even when they fixed performance issues. But Cold War and Black Ops 4, if they just keep fixing some of the performance issues the game has, they polish it up a little bit more, add some more content, the game then becomes a much more improved game. That's why Black Ops 4 to me is so much more enjoyable now than it was when it was first out. So that's my second point there, ideas over polish any day of the week. And my third point here is we still have 7 months till launch. These developers can do a lot in 7 months. They actually made the entirety of Blackout within like 9 months. So if the game is in a really bad state right now, I think they could turn it around at some point. I don't think Activision would let them release a product that's absolutely crap in every way, shape, and form. It's going to be somewhat functional. It's going to have at least some content. And I do have hope that Sledgehammer Games can turn it around in some way, shape, and form. And as I said before, over time, they can definitely improve it as well, even if we're getting like almost a beta product at launch. And I know this sounds like, oh my God, you're shilling to Activision. Well, we'll talk about this more in a couple minutes in this video because I want to kind of go in depth of some other ideas I have, which goes into my fourth point here. Even if this game is just bad, right? It releases like crap, there's all sorts of issues, it's got a lack of content, and even the ideas themselves aren't even designed all that well. So even my point before doesn't even matter because even the design of the game is bad. I still think we could see some good come from this, and I'll explain why. So have you guys noticed that Call of Duty only really, I mean, this goes for anything, not just Call of Duty actually, this goes for life in general, any franchise, anything. Innovations and big changes only come when the games start doing poorly or when there's less interest or when people aren't buying them as much. And that's obvious. If they're doing really well, why change the system? That's why Cold War has so many similarities to Modern Warfare, because they wanted to build off of that Modern Warfare success. You could tell Cold War was made in a much different way. They were probably trying to make it more like the Black Ops 4 systems, not completely, but they probably had a Pick-10 system in mind. I'm sure they forced them to put a gunsmith system in there because in Modern Warfare. I'm sure the menus were made to look more like Modern Warfare just because of Modern Warfare's success, so they can keep it more similar. Obviously, the whole Warzone integration happened. If this game does poorly, if World War II Vanguard does poorly, they're going to make some big changes for the franchise, not only in terms of design, but also in terms of just the bigger ideas and what they decide to do. Now, I know a lot of people might say, oh, they don't want big innovations. They love Modern Warfare, they love Cold War, they want COD to stay the way it is. To that I say, why? Why would you want the game to stay the same every year? I'm big for innovations. I love innovations. I think Call of Duty needs to do that. I think all franchises need to do that. I get sick and tired of franchises that continuously do the same thing over and over again, and it usually doesn't work. I want to see diversity between these games. I want them to feel different and unique, and they're not going to feel that way if they keep staying the same. And there's also some bad things about these CODs that aren't going to change as long as they're selling well. You know what I mean? Look back at Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare. Black Ops 3 didn't do like incredibly well, but it definitely had a decent amount of player counts, and a lot of people were interested in Black Ops 3. There was a big community there. Infinite Warfare comes around, and the game does terrible. Terrible. One of the worst selling Call of Duties of all time. It still was like the #1 selling game that year, but it was still not that highly sold compared to other Call of Duty games. So you know what they did? Huge innovations were made. Huge. I mean, we saw a complete turnaround in supply drop systems. We saw Modern Warfare Remastered being released. Now, I know they already planned that to release anyways, but I think they kind of intended that this game probably wouldn't go over too well because they knew people weren't too crazy about the futuristic era anymore, but they were already working on it. So they're like, okay, we have to throw in something to at least get some people excited who aren't interested in the futuristic era. So what happened after this? World War II dropped, then Black Ops 4, completely different Call of Duties. That's 3 CODs in a year that are completely different. Infinity Ward's game, and then you got Sledgehammer game, and then you got the Treyarch game. Completely different. All 3 of those were completely, and then Modern Warfare drops after that. All very different COD experiences. And why was that? Because the games weren't selling all that well. But once Modern Warfare comes out and it does incredibly well, what happens with Cold War? They kind of do the same thing, except some changes. Of course, it's not the exact same. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But a lot of the changes were minor and more aligned to Warzone, like Zombies. You can see completely took a lot of pages out of Warzone's book and a lot of their mechanics and systems. That's just how they do. So we get this World War II Vanguard. If it doesn't sell all that well, that is a big big thing for Call of Duty in terms of what they're going to do next. They might drop Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer remastered. They might start working on a Black Ops 2 multiplayer remastered. They might start doing completely new COD mechanics and features. They might start doing completely new things because they know they need a revitalization of the series when it starts to not sell as well. That interests me. That gets me excited. That makes me think World War II Vanguard is going to make changes that are good changes. Maybe they'll actually give us a way to earn bundle items because they know not many people are playing the game. We need some people to have incentives to possibly play more. They will throw in contracts, stuff like what Infinite Warfare did. They threw all sorts of things in Infinite Warfare to get to people to play the game more. Black Ops 3 didn't really have as many incentives because people were playing the game anyways. They didn't really care. If people are already playing your game anyways, they have no reason to improve it. They have no reason to make it any better. Now, I'm not saying Black Ops 3 didn't do some good things. They did, but they kind of just did the same thing throughout its life cycle. They even put more DLC into Black Ops 3, into the second season of it, into Infinite Warfare's life cycle. It's like, you ever seen SpongeBob before? You know how the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket are always like in competition with one another? They're always competing to who's better. For some reason, Mr. Krabs always waits to make big innovations with the Krusty Krab once the Chum Bucket starts doing some big things, like Plankton starts getting more people to go to his restaurant because he does like some new cool food or something. I don't know. You've seen SpongeBob before. I'm sure a lot of you have. Once he starts doing these crazy things, that forces Mr. Krabs to be like, oh shit, people aren't coming to my place as much. I need to start pumping out some better food. And you know what makes this even more of an analogy, more of an important analogy in this situation? Battlefield 6, or whatever the hell it's called, and Halo Infinite are coming out this year as well, along with Call of Duty World War II Vanguard. So that gives World War II Vanguard a lot more competition. The more competition they have, the more they're going to do. Warzone and Cold War and Modern Warfare doesn't really have much competition. There's not a lot of big FPS games coming out as of recently. Fortnite is still as big as it was, but it's definitely not like taking over the scene like it was before. It's definitely still very popular, especially within the casual community and definitely within the younger audience, but it's not as big in terms of the YouTube community as of right now as it was before. And there's just not a lot of other FPSs that are out right now that are really bigger than Warzone. I feel like Warzone's like almost the biggest one there. Maybe not in terms of like Twitch viewership and such, but in terms of player counts, I think it's probably up there, but one of the highest. Overall, there's not a lot of competition, especially for the multiplayer side of things. What will Battlefield 6 and Halo do? Give them more competition. Give them more of a reason to push forward, do big innovations, make changes that are consumer friendly and make people happy and actually want them to play the game. Cold War isn't really doing that many things because they know people are going to play the damn game anyways. Like, I love Cold War and all, but let's be real here. They're not doing anything too major. They're just adding bundle items. They're adding new maps here and there. It's like, okay, that's what we expected. They're not doing any huge changes that make me go, wow, this is awesome. They're keeping things more or less the same. Maybe they'll do something about skill-based matchmaking finally because of all this competition, especially if Battlefield 6 and Halo Infinite don't have like strict skill-based matchmaking systems. You might see people switching over to those games, and that's a good thing because now that's going to force Call of Duty to be like, oh shit, we need to do some changes here. That's why I'm so excited. I think this last reason is probably my best reason here. The other ones just kind of bank on the fact that let's hope Sledgehammer can put it together. Hopefully they'll have good ideas. Hopefully it'll be better than what we're hearing. But this last one's like, okay, even if it is a dumpster fire, good will come from it because that's what happens. They're not going to give up. They're not going to say, oh, our game's not doing well. Oh no, the other studios are doing better. Oh no, I guess we have to give up and Call of Duty's done and we're going to quit. Like, that's not how they work. It's not like the movie industry. When a movie does really bad, sometimes they just give up. No, they'll innovate. They'll do new things. They'll try something new. It's already a really successful franchise. If Call of Duty wasn't that successful of a franchise in the first place, then yes, I could see them giving up, but that's not going to happen with COD. So we're going to see some great changes made this year, I guarantee. I'm really excited to see what Sledgehammer Games can do. Nonetheless, hopefully we get that Modern Warfare 2 remastered as well. That'd be really awesome. And I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace out.